First tonight, a day after a ceasefire deal for Gaza, Donald Trump has said he'll decide on what he thinks is right about whether there should be a two-state solution in the Middle East and would coordinate with other countries on the issue. He was asked about the future of Gaza on board Air Force One on his way home, having signed the first phase of his Gaza peace deal. The next steps remain uncertain. And today, the Civil Defense Force in Gaza said Israeli troops had killed 7 Palestinians in 2 separate incidents close to IDF forces in Gaza City. The IDF says it opened fire on suspects who posed a threat as they approached the yellow line boundary where its troops have withdrawn to under the Trump ceasefire plan. But Palestinian medical sources say they were killed when Israeli drones fired at residents who were inspecting their homes. A Hamas spokesman called the incident a violation of the ceasefire. Meanwhile, the identities of the 4 bodies of hostages returned to Israel on Monday night have been confirmed. The Israeli military says the families of Guy Iluz and Bipin Joshi, a Nepali national, and 2 other hostages whose names will be published later, we understand one of those names has now been released, have been notified. Hamas said it could take time to recover another dead 26 hostages, as not all their burial sites are known. As the living hostages undergo medical checks, Israeli media are reporting news of their ordeals, how they endured long periods of starvation and torture. In Gaza, many of the hundreds of Palestinians released after being held without charge by Israel during the war have been alleging torture and maltreatment. Some expected to be reunited with their families only to find they'd been killed.
About something very much different. We're talking about rebuilding Gaza. I'm not talking about single state or double state or two state. We're talking about the rebuilding of Gaza.
What's the road ahead for governing Gaza? Because
a lot of people like the one state solution. Some people like the two state solutions. We'll have to see. I haven't commented on that.
How do you see bridging?
Wasn't it amazing? Even that last meeting, when you see the heads of those countries, those are serious countries, right? But I thought it was fantastic. And seeing the so-called hostages, but those kids come back home and the way their parents just went crazy. Your father would not be that way with you. He'd be okay, but he wouldn't be like that.
I would get a hug.
A hug, a minor hug. Okay, come on, Peter. Let's go. No, he would be. I'm only kidding.
I'm hopeful, and I think I'm a lawyer, and I think agreement should be, accomplished and respected. And so I believe the other side should accomplish his obligation towards this agreement. And I really hope for the mothers and the fathers and the families, and for us, the Israelis, that the bodies will be here, because for us to bury the dead of our people here in Israel, it's very important.
But I'm very sad that there are still dead Israeli people there. And we will fight as much as it's possible to bring them home. We are not full happy with what happened, and we will fight and we will bring them home.
Well, staying with that story, one of the big issues, of course, in the Middle East and Gaza, to be specific at the moment, is the distribution of aid to Gazans. For more on this, I'm joined now on the line from Amman, Jordan, by the Senior Communications Manager at UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, Jonathan Fowler. Mr. Fowler, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So first of all, is UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinians who you work for, now allowed to resume operations in Gaza following this peace deal?
Well, in fact, we never ceased our operations in the Gaza Strip. We have 12,000 staff who've been working flat out in Gaza, all local staff, since the beginning of this war, providing healthcare, water sanitation, other kinds of aid operations basically on the ground. So we've never stopped. The issue is that in March, like other international organizations, in fact, like all aid agencies, we were banned from bringing any kind of aid into the Gaza Strip. There was a total ban on aid from March to May. As the result, there was then a famine declared in August in the Gaza Strip. But in the meantime, the ban on us bringing in aid has not been lifted. And this is a problem because our aid stocks, primarily in Jordan and in Egypt, we have enough food for the entire population of the Gaza Strip for about 3 months. And if we can't bring that in, that is a huge problem because you have a desperate, starved population. Malnutrition is raging across the Gaza Strip. And we need to be able to bring all that aid in. So we have never ceased operating on the ground. So it's not just about getting aid across the border. The ability to work on the ground and distribute, that's absolutely critical also. But we've never stopped.
Well, I mean, beyond your specific sort of organization, what's the current situation of aid now in Gaza? I mean, have you started receiving humanitarian, or have they started receiving humanitarian supplies into the territory? Because that was part of this peace deal, wasn't it?
Yes, supplies have begun to enter, and not just aid supplies, but actually, to a certain degree, commercial supplies, which may seem surprising to some people. But getting the economy moving again is also critical for reconstruction and rehabilitating the population. But supplies have begun to move in over recent days. But it's I mean, to call it a drop in the ocean would be generous. It's a tiny amount which has been allowed in over the last few days. I mean, one could argue that something is better than nothing, but it's a very, very insignificant amount of supplies that are getting in. I mean, a mixture of food, some sort of shelter materials like tents and blankets, medicine, but you're talking about a handful of trucks here and a handful of trucks there. It's really not enough to dent the nature of this humanitarian catastrophe. And there has to be a massive scaling up of an operation to meet the needs on the ground.
So basically, I mean, the situation remains precarious. So what are the biggest shortfalls that you have there? I hope you haven't already said that and I missed it.
No, not at all. That's completely fine. I mean, the main, everything really. I mean, everything is missing. I mean, what are immediate human needs? Well, food, for example. I mean, the population has been starved. Our data was showing that a couple of months ago, at least, around 55,000 children were in cases of malnutrition so severe that they had a 3 to 5 times higher chance of dying. And these were under fives, children who are particularly emblematic of the victims of this war. The situation has not improved markedly, even though aid, has begun to move in. So what's needed is food, food with appropriate nutritional value. Personal hygiene materials to give people an element of dignity. That can be anything through, sanitary pads, through soap, household bleach, trash bags. And because winter weather is beginning to set in, we're moving into autumn and winter is coming and it's just around the corner. Shelter materials like tents, blankets, people are living out in the open. The Gaza Strip is almost completely flattened. People are trying to go home to their home communities, but they don't have homes to go to. They have rubble to go back to, rubble which is full of unexploded bombs, and tragically, human remains under the rubble. So people need shelter. They need tents. They need winter clothing. They basically need everything. Fuel also needs to come in to fuel pumping stations to provide electricity. And medicine, of course. I mean, those are the kind of classic sort of basic needs, but it really is that level.
There is, of course, still huge uncertainty in Gaza over what happens next. I mean, amid reports of a chaotic security situation there with sort of rival gangs and Hamas shooting at each other, how much might that hamper efforts to get aid through to desperate civilians?
Yes, this is a very important point. I mean, Gaza already, over the 2 years of war, was the most dangerous place in the world to be an aid worker. Tragically, more than 370 UNRWA team members, so team members from the agency that I work for, have been killed in the Gaza Strip. There is no precedent for that in the history of the United Nations, and that's extremely troubling. Now, beyond that, of course, in any situation this apocalyptic, there is inevitably an element of anarchy and community conflict. You have different kinds of armed groups moving around. There will be criminal gangs who may want to get their hands on aid, because in a situation of scarcity, all these things have values. This is another reason why we need to flood the Gaza Strip with aid, because that also dents the market value of food, to be quite blunt. So the more food that gets in, it's not just about saving lives, but it's also about reducing the value for people who may be tempted to steal it. And indeed, I mean, humanitarians trying to move around in vehicles in the Gaza Strip, it's not as if there are highways. The roads are littered with rubble, for example, and the roads which are usable are often blocked by people who are just walking, trying to go home. So all of this, it makes for a very dangerous situation, and yet the ability to move around and do our work, that's fundamental for humanitarians to be able to be effective. And we have very, very brave team members in the Gaza Strip who are stepping up their efforts as we speak.
Well, Hamas has said that it will not allow a security vacuum to take place in the Strip. We even had President Trump suggesting that there was tacit approval for them to be policing the streets for a period of time. But obviously, the longer this goes on, the greater the possibility of sectarian violence, which takes things dangerously away from the peace plan, which is supposed to involve new governance for Gaza, doesn't it? I mean, how much does that worry you?
I mean, it's always troubling. What the people of the Gaza Strip need now is they need a sustainable ceasefire and to be on the road to peace. This is the only way for people who have faced 2 years of absolutely brutal warfare and an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. It's the only way for them to get anywhere near, the first step on the road to recovery. As a humanitarian worker, obviously don't speak to the politics of the issue. We are aware of the context, needless to say. But the point is, there has to be a kind of social order needs to recover. I mean, the complete breakdown in law and order over the course of this war has made it very, very hard for us to do our work as aid workers. We need to be able to function in an environment where it's possible to work and not to be. There's always going to be risks for aid workers, of course, but we need to be in a situation where it's not life-threatening to do our job.
Jonathan, I want to thank you very much indeed and commend you for the work that you're doing there. Jonathan Fowler is the Senior Communications Manager at UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, and he was talking to me on the line there from Amman, Jordan.